Hello, BookTube. Well, it's that time again. Time for another BroTube Top 10 movie list. I've been doing a series of these videos with the booktuber Grammaticus Books. I'll leave a link to his channel down below. It's been a ball. It's been a great deal of fun. Where we each would pick a heading, top 10 of this kind of movie or that kind of movie, and then we make our list without telling each other what the list is, and then we post them, and we see where things fall. Now, our choice today is guided by a beloved booktube event, June on the Range, created by Michael K. Vaughan a few years ago, all about Westerns. So it seemed only natural. I thought it was a great idea. In fact, no matter who came up with it, I'm going to take credit for the idea that we should do top 10 Westerns, top 10 Western movies for our latest BroTube list. So that's what we did, and Grammaticus Books, he pre-films his videos because he has people and friends and a job, maybe 2 jobs. So his videos tend to go up early, very early. I make my videos day by day. I don't plan anything ahead of time. My videos don't drop. They just happen, like a bomb going off. A bomb? You bring a bomb around a baby? So I have already seen his video. I already know what his choices are for the top 10 Western movies. And the question will be, can he get through his whole list of top 10 Western movies without stumbling into his usual bad taste? And I think when you watch his video, I'll leave it linked down below, you will agree with me that Grammatic can't. So we'll go through his list first before we go to mine, so that your tension will be raised as to whether or not we overlap in any way. His first pick is Mel Brooks's Blazing Saddles from 1974. It's an absolute classic that is cancelable in literally a million ways today by the mob of blue-haired censors that we have given power over our lives. Corporations, multi-billion-dollar corporations, have said to these 12 psychos on Twitter, our company's bottom line is at your disposal. If you don't approve of what we're doing, we don't care what our shareholders say. We'll tank the whole company to get your approval. And Blazing Saddles is incredibly inappropriate in every possible way. That's what makes it so sublime. So I actually do like this choice. It's a send-up of Westerns, but it'll do. Then his next pick was True Grit. 1969 True Grit, the True Grit version by Henry Hathaway, directed by Henry Hathaway, starring John Wayne, the only role for which he won an Oscar. Adapted from Charles Portis's novel, freely adapted from Charles Portis's novel. It's a terrific movie, so I can't fault Grammaticus Books for this one. He's doing fine so far. Blazing Saddles is literally side-achingly funny, and during David Murphy's recent visit, it got visited a few times. There was a few choice clips in there that we watched. But right after that, Grammaticus stumbles. Because his next pick is Winchester 73 from 1950, Anthony Mann's Winchester 73, The Story of a Gun. Grammaticus Books in his video goes on and on, some sort of palaver about how it takes away the mythology of the West. I think what it really does is take away the mythology of Jimmy Stewart. The most horrible thing about Jimmy Stewart, everybody loves him. You're never sorry to see Jimmy Stewart on the screen. There's a horrible thing about him. He's not a leading man, and nobody likes to admit that. Nobody in his entire career. He was in show business for 80 years. No one wanted to admit that. And Winchester 73, so you're gonna think he's great. You're gonna think that I'm contradicting myself on my own list. He's great in ensemble pieces, but he can't just hold a movie by himself. He just can't do it, and he doesn't in Winchester 73. So Grammaticus is wrong. So we'll see if he gets up off the mat. His next pick is from 1953. It's George Stevens' Shane. The more I think about it, I just recently reread Shane and thought it was brilliant. I reread the novel and thought it was brilliant. And the reason why every time it came up on BookTube, especially during June on the Range, and people would reread it and just sing its praises, and of course, every critic in the country was singing its praises when it was in the Library of America volume of Westerns. The reason why I always had a kind of a cat mew face when that happened, I think, I now realize, is because of how little I like the movie. The movie is just primary color stomping all over you as a viewer. Now, not in a good way. That can be done well, but Shane is the movie is so hokey. And if it's hokey, what do we say about Grammaticus' next pick? High Noon. This is 1952. This is Fred Zinnemann. This is The Coop. And oh my God, oh my God, these choices that Grammaticus always makes they're windows into his psyche, and that makes them interesting. Certainly more interesting than a lot of the movies themselves. I defy you to watch High Noon from beginning to end and enjoy the whole thing. He can do it, sure, because he's watching it through fogged up glasses of sentimentality, as he is overwhelmingly for another movie on his list. Overwhelmingly, the only way that another movie on his list can be enjoyed by anyone is through foggy lenses of sentiment. Reminds me of that scene in The Simpsons where the woman's trying to film Homer and says, "Slap more Vaseline on the lens." I could be wrong. Maybe some of you are howling. Certainly his next choice had courage. He chose the 3:10 to Yuma. But he chose the Jimmy Mangold's version from 2007. The remake. He chose the remake. And that shows courage, and in this particular instance, I agree with him. For one main reason. The thing that makes the remake of 3:10 to Yuma good, it's not great, it doesn't belong on a list, but it is good, is the same reason that makes literally any movie with this element good. And that element is Russell Crowe. He has unbelievable instincts. If he's in a movie, it will be good. Even when the movie is clogged up by Christian Bale. Why does this guy get work? I don't have any idea why he gets work. He is so bad. He is just so bad. But, I mean, you've got all these other people acting, and then when he's on screen, you feel like you have a pre-workout come down. You feel like you've got a steroid hangover. That's all he is, just a walking steroid hangover. His next choice is The Magnificent Seven, the John Sturges version, the 1960 version. He has no patience at all for the remake in this case, which shows me that at least on some level there's a Grammaticus in there somewhere that I might be able to reach, because he picks a remake that is superior to the original. Here he picks the original because the remake is bad. The remake of Magnificent Seven is bad. I'm rather fond of it for only one scene, because there's one scene in which Chris Pratt is blown to smithereens, and that's always satisfying to watch. That's just as satisfying for me as the scene in the remake of of Death Takes a Holiday, Meet Joe Black, where Brad Pitt is smashed to smithereens in a car crash. It's always worth it to me for that. Or My Girl, the old tearjerker My Girl, which is a dumb flyweight movie, but Macaulay Culkin dies in it, and that's something. but otherwise, no, the remake of Magnificent Seven is pretty bad, and the John Sturges movie is pretty good. But again, it is such a Shane movie. I guess it's no surprise that if Grammaticus liked Shane, and High Noon especially, oh my God, he would like The Magnificent Seven. And oh my God, if you could see a pattern forming in those three movies, then you know what the next thing is going to be. He steps away from the movies for his most egregious pick of all, the Gunsmoke TV show, which was the 20-year distillation of High Noon and Shane and The Magnificent Seven. It's the distillation of all the dumbest stuff about westerns, of all the most programmatic stuff about westerns. Which again, you might hear me condemn programmatic stuff in a western, and you might say, "But what about your choices?" To which I respond with, "Zip it, partner." What can we say about him picking Gunsmoke as a TV show? If you're going to deviate from movies to pick a Western TV show, you're not going to pick Deadwood? Anyway, as much as I rolled my eyes for that pick, my eyes went up into my head, down my spine, and came out the Suez Canal for his next pick, which is Sergio Leone, The Man with No Name trilogy, which, I'm going to go out on a limb here, Grammaticus Books does not like those movies. No man likes those movies. No man can tell you what happens in them. No man likes them. The only reason they make guy lists like this is because of Clint Eastwood. And not because of the acting job that he does. Clint Eastwood can't act when he wants to. He doesn't do any acting in these dumb movies. Instead, it's because they want to be him. They want to be that guy. They want to be the man with no name. I don't want to be the man with no name. The man with no name would reek to high heaven. I don't want to be him. These movies are junk. What on earth? I will never understand why they are venerated. Never. Then we move on to Grammaticus' first choice. His number one movie. Now, he says that his top three are not in any order. But that is decidedly non-American. And, it's not the first non-American note that's struck in his video. When he mentions True Grit, he says in his video, well, you got to put one John Wayne movie on the list. And that's when I suspected that he's perhaps a Bolshevik. And the same thing is true with his top three. This is America, pal. You don't have an interchangeable top three. Number one is number one. Number one is the best, okay? And his number one is 1993's Tombstone. And it's the gunfight at OK Corral. It's Wyatt Earp. It's Val Kilmer as a sickly Doc Holliday. It's so bad. It's just so bad. Watch it without your dude bro lens on. At least Grammaticus Books did live up to the title of the series, because he gave you the ultimate dude bro list. And this Tombstone from 1993 it has entered into their mythology. They can all quote it. They say, Grammaticus in his video says that he and his friends quote from the movie all the time. But there's actually only one quote that any of them really care about. The one quote that ushered them all into maturity. Today, I am a man. And that is, I'll be your huckleberry. For some reason, the dude bros just go nuts over that line. I just don't get it at all. I don't get it at all. Kevin Costner made a better movie about Wyatt Earp and the gunfight at OK Corral. Is it ever on any of these lists? No. But anyway, that was Grammaticus' list. It was interesting, but also true to form for Grammaticus in that it was a multi-car train wreck. But, fortunately, I am here to ride in on my steed and save the day. And unlike the Lone Ranger, I'm going to hang around long enough for you to thank me. I want you to thank me. I'm going to give you the real top 10 list, the perfect top 10 list of the best Western movies, starting in 1939 with John Ford's movie Stagecoach, which gives us a young John Wayne who is finally moving into his own capabilities. I don't quite know the term for it when it's an actor instead of a writer. When it's a writer, it's the moment when the writer finds their own voice. So they might be writing words. They might have written a dozen novels before, but finally they find their own voice, and suddenly everything is different. And it's in Stagecoach that John Wayne starts to do that. So it's my number 10. Then we move on to 1948 with Fort Apache by John Ford, where John Wayne stars with Henry Fonda as a martinet colonel of an outpost who has nothing but scorn for the Apache. He says at one point to John Wayne and his fellow soldiers that the few miserable examples he saw on his ride in don't seem to him to be any cause for concern. John Wayne says a great line: "If you saw them, sir, they weren't Apache." Henry Fonda's character will brook no opposition. There are some wonderful bits and pieces. This is John Ford assembling essentially his core troupe of actors, minus a couple, adding a couple, but core people. And it has a great ending. The rest of the movie is, the old hands dealing with a new martinet. That tired old gimmick that is so enjoyable, that is so well done. But the end of the movie takes from the legend of Custer, who is invoked several times in the movie. Then we move on to 1949, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, by John Ford, which has excellent visuals, a fantastic performance by John Wayne. Here, in this movie, John Wayne is playing old. He's playing older than his age, and he is fantastic. She Wore a Yellow Ribbon. You might have mistaken it in Fort Apache, because when Henry Fonda wants to, Henry Fonda was a chameleon of an actor. He's not given much credit for that, but when he wants to command the scene, he really can. So you might have missed the work that John Wayne is doing opposite him. But in She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, you can't miss it. In She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, you are looking at a star, a genuine star. And then we'll move on to my pick number 7, which is Rio Grande from 1950 by John Ford, starring John Wayne, which is a terrific movie. It's an attempt on the part of Ford to balance out the Duke with a whole bunch of other actors pulled from different places in the public consciousness. An attempt to switch up that core cast and maybe give you some faces that you aren't expecting to see, or in roles that you're not expecting. I think it works perfectly well. Then we move on to 1956. This is The Searchers by John Ford, starring John Wayne. I need not introduce it. It is an absolutely iconic movie. There's virtually not a scene in it that isn't terrific, and the ending, the iconic 10 ending scenes, are amazing. They are as effective now as they were, 60 years ago. Then we move on to number 5. My number 5 is The Alamo. I'm stretching a point here that it's a Western. I think it probably counts as a Western. It's from 1960. It's directed by John Wayne himself, who does a fairly good job. It's a leaden attempt at directing, but it is effective. It has some wonderful quiet moments and some great interactions between, of course, Wayne. In the Alamo story, there are 3 main characters. In the real Alamo story, there are 3 main characters. No matter how you slice it, no matter how you write the story, there are going to be 3 main characters. And Wayne knew that, and he was very much the star of the Alamo. He went into it as the star. He was the one that the money people were putting up money to produce. And he does a wonderful job of making sure that it is still a 3-point movie, that it's still got 3 main characters. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. Russell Crowe, the aforementioned Russell Crowe, for instance, has much the same apparatus. If he's in a movie, he's the star of the movie, the star. If he's in a movie, he's usually the reason the movie got made, and certainly the reason the movie got financed. And he can tolerate supporting cast, but they're very much supporting cast. He cannot tolerate an equal. I know people are going to say, Master and Commander, he has an equal. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. He cannot tolerate an equal performance in the movie. And maybe you could say that Wayne couldn't either, that the Duke didn't really want a full equal unless it was Maureen O'Hara. But he comes awful close in the Alamo. And boy, oh boy, is it good. Oh boy, is it good. Then we move on to number 4. One of the oddest choices on my list. This is the aforementioned Henry Hathaway, who directed Grammaticus pick. He's one of his only good picks, True Grit. He did a movie in 1965 called The Sons of Katie Elder. You have a lot of returning cast members coming back here. It's a lot of people that the Duke liked to work with. But it's an odd John Wayne movie. It's not the oddest one. There are odder ones. A lot of his contemporary stuff I don't think has ever been fully appreciated or studied in any way, and maybe shouldn't be. And a lot of his explicitly rah-rah wartime movies, the buy war bonds movies, I don't know how much resonance those things have. I keep meaning to rewatch all of them and just see what I can see. Now that World War II is almost exclusively the province of history, there's almost nobody who remembers it anymore. It's almost passed out of living memory. There's a handful of 110-year-old World War II veterans, and there's David Murphy. And aside from that, there's no. So it might be interesting to look at those movies now and see what they feel like, knowing that propaganda is long gone. But The Sons of Katie Elder is still odd. It almost wants to be subversive, I think. In some places, it almost wants to be subversive. It ends up not being. It ends up being just rousing and wonderful. Then we'll move on to 1969. We will not switch directors. We're still dealing with Henry Hathaway. We're dealing with True Grit. Which is not you have to have a John Wayne movie on a list like this. Yeah, it's not that. The list has to be all John Wayne. There aren't any other Western stars. What on earth are you talking about? Clint Eastwood in a poncho? I'm surprised you didn't choose Charles Bronson. I'm amazed that Bronson, a brick with a SAG card. I'm amazed he wasn't on Grammaticus list. No, I'm choosing True Grit because it's absolutely incredible. It's an amazing movie. And then we'll move on to number 2, which may be my favorite movie on this list. You would think, well, it's your list, but I'm trying to make it the best list. Number 2 may be my favorite
It's directed by Don Siegel. It's from 1976. It was John Wayne's last movie. It's The Shootist, in which he plays an aging, ailing gunfighter who has come to a small town to seek out the medical opinion of an old doctor friend of his, played in a very subordinate part by Jimmy Stewart, but played wonderfully for the one scene they have. And he's dying of cancer, and so was Wayne. And it's his last movie. And it is very much a tribute to his screen persona. When we get a flash, as David and I noticed just when he was here this weekend, when we get a flashback to his character's past, it's scenes from John Wayne's own movies. I think it's wonderful. Absolutely. I love the movie. Absolutely love it. There's not a scene in it that I would change. One of John Wayne's steadfast long-term on-screen opponents returns for the shootout at the end. Lauren Bacall is in the movie, approaching the autumn of her career in an amazing form. Ron Howard, I believe this was his last movie performance. He does a great job. Everybody's good in it. Everybody's good in it. And it's heartbreaking. It really is. It's terrific. So it's my number 2, which leaves number 1. And since I'm not a commie, my number 1 is number 1. It is not only number 1 on my list, it is the best Western ever made. And when you're talking about the best Western ever made, you're not talking about, I'll be your huckleberry. You're talking about John Wayne and John Ford. For God's sake, you're talking about John Wayne and John Ford. If you're talking about the greatest Western ever made, you're talking about The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. I can't believe this needs to be said, even in the benighted 21st century. This is from 1962, and it is, Jimmy Stewart is in here again. This might be the one little cavil that you could give me that Stewart is the star of the movie. He very much is not. The movie is expertly counterbalanced among a number of different people. He's wonderful in the movie, absolutely wonderful, as an Eastern tenderfoot who stumbles into a number of different psychodramas out on the frontier that he has no part in. He's not part of any of them. He gets caught up in them all. Really, the psychodramas involve John Wayne's character, who is not happy, and is not going to be happy in the course of the movie, and the villain, Liberty Valance. And the whole thing is amazing. From start to finish, it's amazing, including the great reveal at the end. So, okay, if you're talking about the number 1 best Western ever made, and you don't want it to be The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, well, okay. Then it could be She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, or Fort Apache even. But if you're talking about the greatest Western movie ever made, it's going to be John Ford directing John Wayne. Anyway, there you go. There is your perfect list of the best Westerns that were ever made. I think a whole bunch of other people are going to throw their, as Grammaticus Books puts it, they're going to throw their 10-gallon hat in the ring. Fine. But you're on notice that the perfect list has already been given to you. So I will leave a link to Grammaticus' video, so you can go and listen to his enthusiastic descriptions of the movies that he picks, and then titter a little. And we'll see what our next topic, what our next heading will be, so that we can see how he's going to embarrass himself next time. Now you have the best list. If you have not seen any of the movies on this list, go and watch them. You're going to love them. I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, Boot.